Hi, my name is Justyna Jajszczok and I work at University of Silesia in Katowice. Welcome to another video in which I discuss detective fiction, this time in the medium of radio comedy. If you're interested in detective fiction, you've probably read a lot of it. So much, in fact, that you may at some point start to see, even unconsciously, the patterns, clues, red herrings, and solutions, which to you become glaringly obvious. Is there any point in reading more crime stories when you've become the master detective yourself? Ask yourself this: are you a fan of the puzzle element of the story, who wants to be surprised by the ingenious construction of the mystery? Or do you reach for such literature because of its atmosphere, the characters that speak to you or that you can identify with, or the escapism these books can offer? If you've answered either of them, or both, with yes, I have an author for you. John Finnemore is not a crime writer per se, but a creator of a comedy sketch show on BBC Radio 4. However, he does have a lot of experience with detective plots. He is one of the very few people who solved the fiendishly complex puzzle novel Cain's Jawbone, which was last year's TikTok sensation, and is now working on its sequel. John Finnemore's Souvenir program is full of sketches that show his knowledge of the mechanics of the genre and his creativity in breaking them. It's a proof how a clever twist, metanarrative elements, or pure ridicule can refresh the stale and formulaic detective story. In this video, I want to show you a few examples from his vast collection to prove that detective fiction will never cease to surprise you if you only remember to have fun with it. All of the sketches I discuss in this video are available on BBC Sounds, and links to the relevant episodes of the program will be provided in the description box below. And of course, there will be spoilers, so I recommend you go and listen to them first and then come back to this video. The first sketch I would like to talk about is called Murder Mystery, and that's just what it is, a spoof of a generic Agatha Christie type detective story. As the narrator, who is a fictionalized version of Finnemore himself, says in the sketch, it ticks all of the boxes. We have an amateur detective with an interest in the unexplained and also a weird hobby. He's a whittler. There's a sidekick of a sort, his cat. We have a murder mystery of the locked room type. Sir Simon is found dead in a cottage, completely sealed from the inside. There's the limited number of suspects, the detective's friend, his sister, the butler, whose name very helpfully is Gardner, and the maid, of whom we know very little, just that she's too short to ring the bell. The sketch is very short, so the pacing is fast and we don't need to spend a lot of time inquiring into the lives and secrets of the suspects. Just one reverie is all it takes for the detective to come up with the solution. So, Hercule Poirot style, he gathers round all of the suspects and reveals the identity of the killer. The most generic murder mystery imaginable. So how does it add to the format and what is the source of humor in it? Finnemore plays with the conventions of a classic detective story in an unexpected way. His loyal companion is an extremely intelligent, three-headed cat whose interest in crosswords leads to the only clue needed for the solution of the crime. Locked room is one of the most popular but also exhausted types of detective stories. It is very hard to come up with something new and fresh in this genre, and yet Finnemore manages it. Once he sets it up, as you can see on the screen, he follows with a clear path to solution, listing all the suspects from his friend to the maid and wondering, was there someone else? Someone I hadn't dreamt of suspecting up to now, but who had been staring me in the face the whole time. I checked, and there wasn't, so I went with the maid. Surprise, surprise, turns out the maid was the killer, and she confesses. "Curse you, Finnemore," she says. "Yes, I did it, and you found me out with your devilish detective trick of asking if it was me." Now all we need is the explanation, and it is really unexpected, which in itself is a feat. So how did she get into the cottage if it was all locked up? Aha! She didn't. The detective says, "You told me that your father built the cottage himself. What I foolishly forgot to ask was when." "Oh, I don't know," answers the son. "Just before he went into it, I suppose. It certainly wasn't here last week." "Precisely. The fact is," says the detective, "Sir Samuel didn't build that cottage. The maid strangled him and built a locked cottage around the body. It's the second oldest trick in the book, just after Got Your Nose." Instead of devising some devilishly clever solution involving a trapdoor, laser beams, and mirrors, Finnemore turns the whole setup on its head. The murder happened first, and only then the cottage was built around the dead body. It is absurd and ridiculous, true, but it's also very funny and unexpected. And honestly, if you read more locked room mysteries, you will witness similar levels of ridiculousness, but nowhere near as much charm. I quite like how all of the suspects are gathered in the Denouement Parlour, which in a typical murder mystery is usually a library or sitting room, where the denouement, that is, the end of the story when everything is explained and the identity of the murderer is revealed, happens. It isn't really a word used in any other context. Being self-referential is also a typical feature of a classic detective fiction, so it makes sense for Finnemore to use it too. But at the same time it reveals the stitches of the textile of the story in an unexpected way, which is also the source of humor. Add to that a few puns, such as the double meaning of bow, remember Finnemore is a whittler, and fishy and rummy, and you have a funny little sketch that pokes fun at detective story conventions while offering a fresh take on one. Another sketch I want to show you makes fun of a different but equally well-known detective genre, the hard-boiled crime novel. We move away from the twee world of English country house to the mean streets of America. This is the land of black and white, bent cops and beautiful femme fatales, where the private investigator or PI must navigate the labyrinth of secrets, corruption and crime, usually hindered by his own traumatic past and addictions. It's a world of MacGuffins, that is something unimportant and irrelevant, which is however of great significance to the characters and the plot. Raymond Chandler is one of the best-known representatives of the genre, with his detective Philip Marlowe trying to solve criminal mysteries, but somehow always ending up beaten unconscious, inexplicably attracted to obviously dangerous women, and disappointed by the state of humanity. It's all very serious. But can you make it funny? Let's see. This time Finnemore, for tax reasons, is an American. His accent is comically bad, as is his knowledge of urban topography. His office is located on the Upper East North South Side, and he is not a particularly busy investigator. As he says, business was slower than a Buick with an elephant in its trunk, or indeed an elephant with a Buick in its trunk. And this joke references Raymond Chandler's style, who is famous for using very creative similes in his writing, such as these: as rare as a fat postman, as welcome as a pearl onion on a banana split, about as excited as a mortician at a cheap funeral, and as easy to spot as a kangaroo in a dinner jacket. Of course, a mysterious lady visits him, but his Englishness hinders his narrative style, as you can see on the screen. And the mysterious lady, of course, has a mission for him. She says, "You go to the corner of 42nd Street and Route 66. There's a bar there called MacGuffin's. Ring 16 times. 4 long, 4 short, 4 medium length, and 4 freestyle. and ask the guy who answers about the alabaster tortoise. As you can see, Finnemore relies on the audience's recognition of the conventions of hard-boiled detective fiction, especially the MacGuffin that appears both in the name and in the form of the alabaster tortoise, which references another very famous hard-boiled MacGuffin, the Maltese falcon. The mission is of course pointless, which is also typical of the genre. The humor elements lie in the absurdity of the descriptions, ring 16 times, comical incompetence of the goon who throws his gun instead of shooting it, and of the whole gang who forget to commit a crime before they hire the PI. The final revelation that my only friend is Jack Daniels may have a more literal meaning than we might expect is just the cherry on the cake. The last sketch I wanted to talk about concerns a detective genre mostly recognized from TV. It's basically a TV series procedural in which every episode is a standalone case and any character development is usually reset to the initial stage before the next episode can begin. There are so many formulaic stories like this, from Midsummer Murders to Father Brown to various iterations of CSI, that it is again very difficult to come up with something fresh, which is well reflected in the scene opening the sketch, where show producers are running out of ideas. Cue Finnemore with his idiosyncratic solution. Yes, this time the protagonist is a store detective, which is basically a glorified security guard who works undercover to detect crime. Here, store detective Casterbridge and his store sidekick Snowman are investigating shoplifting. This week, the case revolves around the mysterious disappearance of a packet of Jaffa cakes. As ever, the level of ridiculousness is high, not just because of the non-entity nature of the crime, but also because in the commercial breaks, the sponsors of the show Mulligan's Ice Lollies are accompanied by the most cringeworthy taglines. Crime drama is sponsored by Mulligan's Ice Lollies. It's a murder how nice they are. And such. You don't have to be a scholar of detective fiction to recognize features of the procedural Finnemore mocks. The detective offering to give up his badge and gun if the case is not solved, the supervisor giving him 24 hours to do so, the stakeout. But all of this is in the context of a store with extremely low stakes. Once again, it is the sidekick who provides the vital clue. Crumbs, he says to express his surprise. And that's just it. The crumbs left at the crime scene could not have come from Jaffa cakes because they don't crumble. The game is afoot again. You can definitely see Finnemore's expertise at finding and poking fun at the characteristic of these genres, while at the same time paying them respect. The sketches are funny, of course, but they also work as actual murder mysteries, which is an incredible feat in itself. I highly recommend you go and give him a try. You might really enjoy it. Or learn more about the mechanics of detective fiction. And that's it. Thanks very much for watching, like and subscribe. And see you next year.